The Galactic Council's detention center on Station Kepler 442b hummed with the nervous energy of a dozen different species, all watching the newest arrival with barely concealed fascination. Raza Chen sat in the corner of the holding area, his dark eyes calmly observing the alien representatives who had been whispering among themselves for the past hour. "The human seems unremarkable," chittered Vexhai, the insectoid Zephyrian ambassador, his mandibles clicking with uncertainty. "Are we certain this is necessary?" Ambassador Anna Volkov of the Terran Federation remained silent in her own holding cell across the corridor, watching the proceedings with the practiced patience of a seasoned diplomat. She had warned them. Oh, how she had warned them. The Thoraxian. High Judge, a crystalline being whose voice rang like struck metal, addressed the assembly. "The human specimen has committed acts of aggression against 3 member species. Standard rehabilitation protocols have failed. Perhaps a demonstration of our galaxy's more primitive justice will teach both humans the futility of their violent nature." Raza looked up from examining his fingernails, his expression mildly curious. "You know, back on Earth we have this saying about assumptions." "Silence!" The judge's crystalline form pulsed with angry red light. "You will observe and learn. Guards, release the Shadow Maw." Anna pressed her face against the energy barrier of her cell. "You absolute fools," she whispered, though her universal translator carried the words clearly through the chamber. A collective intake of breath echoed through the detention area as the transport cage descended from the ceiling. Inside, barely contained by reinforced durasteel bars, was a creature of nightmares. The Shadow Maw stood nearly 3 meters tall, its obsidian fur seeming to absorb light itself. 6 eyes glowed like molten amber in its elongated skull, and claws the length of combat knives scraped against the cage floor. This was a predator from Infernus Prime, a Deathworld where the gravity was 3 times galactic standard, and every living thing had evolved to kill. This creature, the judge announced with satisfaction, has never failed to break the spirit of those who face it. Perhaps now you will understand your place in the galactic hierarchy, human. The cage door hissed open. The Shadow Maw emerged with liquid grace, its massive head swiveling to examine the detention center. When its gaze fell upon Raza, a sound, somewhere between a growl and a purr, rumbled from its throat. A sound that had been the last thing hundreds of beings had ever heard. Raza stood up slowly, brushing dust from his standard-issue detention jumpsuit. He tilted his head slightly, studying the creature with the same mild interest he might show a street performer. "Oh," he said, his voice carrying clearly in the sudden silence. "Hello there, kitty." The Shadow Maw's 6 eyes blinked in what might have been confusion. It took a cautious step forward, and Raza did something that caused several ambassadors to make distressed noises in their native tongues. He smiled and held out his hand. "Come here, big guy. You're just a bit cranky, aren't you?" "Probably been. Cooped up in that cage for too long." The massive predator approached slowly, its claws clicking on the metal floor. When it was close enough to tear Raza apart with a single swipe, it instead lowered its great head and sniffed his extended hand. "That's right," Raza murmured, his voice taking on the gentle tone universally reserved for frightened animals. "I'm not here to hurt you. Nobody should have put you in a cage like that." The Shadow Maw's rumbling growl softened into something that impossibly sounded almost like a purr. When Raza began to scratch behind what appeared to be its ears, the creature's massive form actually relaxed. "Impossible," breathed the Thoraxian judge, his crystalline structure flickering with disbelief. "That creature is engineered for killing. Its neural pathways are hardwired for aggression." Raza glanced up, still stroking the Shadow Maw's massive head. The creature had actually sat down and was leaning into his touch like an oversized house cat. "See, that's where you made your mistake," Raza said conversationally. "You assumed that just because something looks scary and comes from a dangerous place, it's automatically evil. But predators aren't evil. They're just trying to survive. And this poor guy here?" He gestured to the Shadow Maw, who was now making contented rumbling sounds. He's probably been isolated, stressed, and treated like a monster his whole life. Anna couldn't help but smile from her cell. This was exactly why humans had earned their reputation across the galaxy. Not for their capacity for violence, but for their uncanny ability to find common ground with anything that drew breath. My species spent millennia learning to coexist with predators far more dangerous than this sweet boy here, Raza continued, now boldly scratching under the creature's chin. The Shadow Maw's eyes had closed in apparent bliss. We turned wolves into dogs, wildcats into companions, and learned that sometimes the most fearsome-looking creatures just need someone to show them kindness. The detention center had fallen completely silent except for the Shadow Maw's satisfied purring. Several of the alien ambassadors were frantically taking notes. The human has tamed the Shadow Maw? The Zephyrian ambassador's voice pitched higher with each word. Not tamed, Raza corrected gently. Just showed him that not everyone is an enemy. Right, kitty? The Shadow Maw responded by flopping onto its side like an enormous cat, exposing its belly in the ultimate gesture of trust. Raza obligingly began scratching its stomach, causing the purring to intensify. The Thoraxian judge's crystalline form had shifted to a dim, uncertain blue. This is not how apex predators behave. Maybe not where you're from, Raza said with a shrug. But humans learned a long time ago that the difference between a monster and a friend is often just how you choose to treat them. Anna finally spoke up from her cell, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had seen humans accomplish the impossible more times than she could count. Gentle beings, she said formally, allow me to reintroduce you to humanity's greatest weapon. Not our capacity for violence, but our stubborn refusal to believe that anyone or anything is beyond redemption. The Shadow Maw rolled onto its back completely, all 6 eyes now closed in contentment as Raza continued his ministrations. Besides, Raza added with a grin, who could resist this face? And in that moment, as the most feared predator in 3 star systems purred like a kitten under the gentle hands of a human who had seen past its reputation to its heart, the Galactic Council began to understand why humanity had earned its place among the stars, not through conquest but through compassion. The lesson had indeed been learned, just not by whom they had intended.